he'll give us our invocation, and Councilman Truman, if he will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Amen.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate that. We'll move on to item 1, approval of the agenda.
A motion to approve the agenda as outlined.
Thank you. Have a motion. Do I have a second? Thank you.
Turek, aye. Staley, aye.
Nice night.
Thank you, gentlemen. Item 2, announcements. Anything to be brought forth on camera?
Did, you were telling me about a ribbon cutting for the
Yes.
bridge.
Tuesday the 30th at 8 a.m. St. George City in Washington has invited us in Washington to come join them to cut the ribbon for the new Mall Drive Bridge. It's exciting. So 8 o'clock a.m. Tuesday morning. We invite all. I can't speak for Mayor Pike because it's his thunder, but I'm sure he would like all those that would like to attend.
September 30th, Mayor.
September 30th. No other announcements. We'll move on to the declaration of abstentions and conflicts. Any to declare at this time? And if not, we'll go on to our consent agenda to approve the minutes of the council meetings of 8/27/14 and our board audit report for August 2014. Any questions or comments on those two items?
There are none. I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda, including the minutes for 8/27/14 and the audit report for August 2014.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Oh. Okay, I have a motion and a second.
Nice night.
Truman, aye.
Staley, aye.
Segmiller, aye.
Turek, aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. Item 5, parade route. Consideration to ratify the closing of the designated parade route for the Pineview High School Homecoming Parade that was held on September 10th by 2014. We just had to...
It's just like an ex post facto ratification,
Yeah,
just to formalize it.
formalize it.
Mayor, I'll make the motion that we ratify the closing of the designated parade route for the Pineview High School Homecoming Parade held on September 10th.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second.
Turek, aye.
Segmiller, aye.
Staley, aye.
Truman, aye.
Nice night.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Only because they won.
Item 6, employee handbook. Consideration to approve amendments to the Washington City Employee Handbook to meet the state and federal requirements. Ruth Olio. Do we need to have any further discussion on that?
I guess the more I thought about it, I still have concerns about
The social
the
media.
social media policy and the fact of trying to pull out of the workplace use of social media. I still think that we shouldn't be getting into the lives of the employees outside the workplace. You're say, how are we gonna enforce that? We're gonna have an employee whose job is to look at private postings to see if anybody violates, which just creates all kind of worms.
I thought about the same issue, and I would agree to the extent that the policy simply says once you're off duty, you can't represent or make posts that claim to represent the interest of the city as a whole. I would agree that we can limit them to that extent, which is if you're off duty, you no longer post on behalf of the city, right? But I would also agree with you, Councilman Sherman. I'm not sure how to draw the lines or how to enforce something that says in your personal time and your personal statements.
Can I take just a minute?
Yeah.
Last night I wanted to elaborate a little bit more, and so I'm glad I have an opportunity to now. When Mr. Truman had brought up the statement of taking away employee rights and freedom of speech, that's definitely not the purpose of the social media policy. I see the social media policy working in behalf of both city and employee. The social media policy is not going to be dictated, monitored by every move that somebody makes on their own time off the clock. We're not going to have a city Nazi social media out there trying to intervene with people's personal lives. This is more, I see this playing out more as if a employee was to come to human resources or to the city and say, I feel like I've had some type of harassment or I'm being out there slandered on social media, and what do I do? This is something I feel like by having policy, it protects the city to say that we did have some guidelines and some rights. In the event that there is a claim, it helps us to be removed from part of that claim if we've had some type of policy. It also protects the employee to know that, in the event that that happens, we would not be out there dictating your personal lives and things, but we could intervene by just simply saying, be cautious and careful as to what you are posting, or think before you do post. I think a lot of times employees don't realize that social media can cause conflict in the workplace and differences between coworkers, and if you're not in that loop of the social media and you go to work the following day, you do have some conflicts and differences. And now throw in the middle of that if your supervisor or department head is part of that social media too, and you've been excluded from that circle. So I just think that it's a needed policy, and we can definitely look at it and revise it however you would like. That was just my objection as to why we wanted to have this policy.
I appreciate those comments. I still feel fairly strongly that we shouldn't get involved in handling what people post on their own time, on their own private lives, whether it's about another employee, about somebody in the church, about a neighbor, whatever. We shouldn't be involved in ferreting out what they're saying and acting as big brother to say be cautious about what you post on your private time. Now, as Councilman Segmiller says, if it relates to on duty and they're posting, then certainly get involved with that. I just don't think we want to be monitoring that.
Well, I don't think we'd be
Then
monitoring
we're
it.
going to have tattletelling, somebody coming in and say, oh, look at my Facebook, so-and-so posted this about me on their own time, and we're going to say, well, we're going to look into that and investigate that. It's going to bring our resources.
And I don't say you'd be doing full-on investigations on some. Again, how do you monitor somebody's? This is if you had somebody that was truly had some kind of impact based upon those protected classes. I do think the city has a right to be involved if it involves the level of a supervisor, department head, city manager, someone to that level, and they are
Is this
creating conflict within the workplace.
setting a precedent, or other cities have this same?
This is recommended throughout. We've had several ongoing trainings, and our legal carriers have suggested to us that we do have to have one. We have been behind the 8 ball, and we're behind the game. We need to have something in place of some type, some level of.
So
policy.
other cities have adopted this?
Oh yes.
It's fairly common in companies out there that have policy like this. It's very common, partly because they're protecting brands and images of companies, and they protect with their life. You run down the company, you're not an employee anymore, period. This is a little different situation because it is government, it is city, public service, and so you kind of, it isn't so much the brand and a company type thing, but these types of policies are very common, especially in the corporate.
I can actually
And I'm whatever suggestions you have, we'll modify and do what we need to do until you're comfortable with the policy.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with paragraph 2, section 2 of the policy. I think the rest of it is necessary, but section 2 is not necessary. I don't think it betters the interest. Smart plaintiff's attorney might say it actually created a duty on the city to monitor these things because they've got a part of their policy and they needed to watch out for it to build into this negligent. Right, so I can support it with the modification of section
Paragraph
2.
2. Okay.
I would concur with Councilman Truman on this.
Okay. Now you just want it modified or completely removed?
I think we can modify it to where it's clear that during company time you can't do this kind of
Okay.
things. In your private time, you can even remind them there's still laws out there that apply to defamation, slander, those kind of things. But still say we're going to monitor and
Very well.
do anything with it. So,
So do we need to approve the other part of it?
Here's what I'd like to do. Let's, why don't we, since the other stuff is stuff that we,
Thank you, Ruth.
to some extent, we've adopted and we've been kind of plugging in, that if you're comfortable with it, and again, it's up to you guys how you want to move on it. We could adopt it and modify it later. But in all honesty, I can already tell there's at least enough concern that you may want to wait to put that social policy in, which we can easily do. We can wait, discuss it, have it in there. We don't want anybody to think that we're throwing it down anybody's throat just to hurry and get it in there. So it's really up to council. We can just. If you want to adopt the rest, we can adopt it, leave that out. Without adopting that into it, work on it a little more, especially the stuff that that you two are concerned about, adjust it. Because, yeah, the last thing, and I got to tell you, the last thing I want to do is have something that you think creates more liability. Because from my perspective, part of the reason for this was to protect the city, give the city more of a defense that says, yeah, yes, we do care about these things. If a lawsuit's brought against the city, we have a policy that addresses it. So certainly to that extent, I'm even that almost concerns me more. So
Yeah, we're not in a hurry. Let's just get it on the next regular meeting agenda.
yeah, I'm
It'll
fine
give
with
us
that.
time to work on that paragraph and pass it all cleanly the first time.
Yeah, and I'm happy. That's easy to do. And in fact, if anybody has specific kind of concerns, like Council Truman, that's a good suggestion. I'd like to go and look at it too and just make sure. At the very least, I want to make sure we're not creating more liability for us, but also to cover the concern that we're big brothering anybody any more than there may be a feeling we are. So let's do that. And anybody has any specific concerns, shoot them to me or give me a call. We'll talk about them. Otherwise, why don't we just plan on having a kind of a redraft for you guys to take a look at, maybe even next session or even next work session, however you guys want to do it.
I think it'd be pretty easy for us.
I think so too.
Okay. And just to clarify also, Council Staley as well as Council Turek had mentioned just a couple of modifications we need and some editing. One was on the voting, and that would have been on the ordinance, the appeals board ordinance, taking out the by majority vote in one of the provisions. It's just a clarification, but they both mentioned it, so we're going to clean that up. And there's also a typo that Council Staley caught. So when do you find time to read through this stuff that close between 5 a.m. and
5:30.
yeah, 6 o'clock?
Yeah,
You get back here
I
when
sit
you're
next to
doing all
Councilman Segmiller.
my word. But he also had another change on. It was on page 26, and it was just adding a shall be in there. So we'll change that also, and the date for the I think it was appeals board, wasn't it? Council Segmiller.
Yeah.
Just the date. You had
Yeah.
mentioned the date yesterday. We'll change also to confirm it. So otherwise, we'll make those at least those 3 changes. And if you want to pass it, you want to just remove the social media policy for a later date. That's easy to do too.
Yeah. Okay, let's do that.
Okay. We'll probably need a motion to
Mayor,
table
I'll make a motion that the agenda item to consider approving the amendments to the Washington City Employee Handbook be tabled until the next regular meeting. Tara, that'll be which date? October 8th at 6 p.m. And in the interim, we'll work with Council Starkey on making a few of the changes that have been discussed.
Okay. I have a motion on that. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a motion and a second.
Nice and I.
Stealing, aye.
Second Miller, aye.
Turek, aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. Item 7, plat amendment. Consideration to approve a plat amendment for Heritage Fields Phase 3, second amendment, located at approximately 1538 South Heritage Fields Drive. Applicant Mark and Heather Cannon.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry we had to catch up with technology here and get it up. But as stated, the applicant is requesting approval of an amended final plat for Heritage Fields Phase 3. This will actually be a second amendment. The first one, just to bring you up, these two lots right here, lots 80 and 77, wondering why that number jumps. That's because we combined two lots on both those, so we eliminated 2 and 77 got bigger, 80 got bigger. Tonight we're here for this little piece that kind of pops down. If you're following that section line, then it kind of drops and bends back up there. That's what this particular proposal was for. The owners of the lot were working in conjunction with the property owner to the south, and they came to an agreement that they would purchase and give up, and so this is the new boundary where it used to be a straight line, and now has that jog to the south in it, and so that's the really only change here on this particular plat amendment. The Planning Commission reviewed the request at their August 20th meeting. Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the second amended final plat for Heritage Fields Phase 3. And of course it'll just carry basically all the standard final plat conditions, which are 5 of them. And I'll be glad to answer any questions that the council might have on this proposal.
Does this change cause any material changes to the slope or to the drainage plan?
It's all floodplain. How does that? So
So
in essence,
so
yes,
we're
and or in
already-
essence, no, because that
But does
particular
it-
part that's being brought in is all floodplain. They won't be able to build in it without special circumstances. I don't think they really want to build it. I think they just want to increase their backyard, make it more functional to
I guess my question is, and I guess we're early enough in the process that individuals haven't bought these lots yet, but we have seen
These are all sold out.
these are all sold out. Are they
Yes.
pre-sold, or is this
In fact, I think the person actually has a home on this property.
okay?
They're just wanting to extend their backyard.
Okay.
Yeah. That's in essence what it really is. They talked to the property owner to the south of them, asked them if they'd be entertaining selling them a piece, but to do that, unfortunately, they're on the boundary of the subdivision, so they had to amend the boundary, which
So we're
then
just bringing
required.
this part, this
We're bringing-
floodplain part into.
Right. So Phase 3 increased by whatever that square footage, and if it was a square, I could tell you right off real fast, but
And
it's
so
not.
this is just non-buildable area now that's included in these lots that back to the property.
Just this particular lot only. Yeah.
If I recall, we had it's been a few years, but there was one of those lot owners that wanted to come get approval to build a shed back in there, right?
No, he wanted to do horses. He
But
had the
then-
Shetland ponies.
But the HOA wouldn't allow or
Horses,
something.
yeah. The shed we couldn't stop. Again, you can build things in the floodplain, certain things, as long as they have percentage of opening where water can come and go, especially if it's non-livable. There's many things you can build in the floodplain as long as you keep boards up and water can flow through. So certain things we would allow to be built, but there is criteria for that.
That's right. That's right.
But it was the horses is what the big to-do was on that one. They wanted to zone the back half of their lot a different zone.
Looking at your review document and some of the conditions, are those specific to this, or are they just ones that we've kind of talked
They're standard for any final plat, and this will have some new boundary pins in it, so that's why I wanted to pretty much leave, a title report's very necessary for us to make sure there's nothing that they clarify that.
Yes.
All the other stuff, it really, number one, you probably could throw out, but I just leave it in just in case there's something we didn't think about for having that, you know, all improvements bonded for and recorded. The rest of them I think are very applicable, and especially, you know, just they are. And if they're not, it's a non-applicable thing, and we won't worry about it. So.
Go ahead.
No other discussion. I'll make the motion that we approve a plat amendment for Heritage Fields Phase 3, Second Amendment, located at approximately 1538 South Heritage Field Drive, and as relates to the discussion about Lot 75.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second.
Turek, aye.
Seg Miller, aye.
Eisen, aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. Item 8, public hearings and related ordinances. Excuse me. Item A, public hearing for consideration to approve the vacation of an easement for Lot 6 of the Russet Hills Phase 1, property located at 3216 South Camino Real. Applicant Doug Dennett.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to point out this is the plat as it exists. This is not the final plat, of course, but this is just the exhibit we're showing. And I just wanted to show this as a whole. It's an 11-lot subdivision, basically off Majestic Drive. It's the continuation of Camino Real to the south, and then I'll blow up into the last lot. It's particularly down here in Lot 6, and more particularly this corner. I'll just give you a little history. When this lot was originally approved, drainage was an issue. It didn't really have much of a place for it to go. The engineer then proposed putting this detention pond down in this corner of that particular lot. That was, we don't like to do that, but that was the best place for it, and it took care of the problems for them to proceed forward with their 11-lot subdivision. Since that time, there's now a new regional detention pond over in the Staley Farm. That was, with that being put in, there is no need for this particular detention pond. It'll be a direct flow into that regional pond.
Is that what the big pond is they've been building?
Yes.
I didn't realize that.
So that's going to be water for all of the Rusted Hills area, for the Roadrunner Ridge that's coming. It's already been pre-approved, preliminary plat by the council. So all that area right through there, and you know, west of Galilee Heights and Villa Toscana, all that development going on in there. This pond will be able to take that.
Will it be collected in pipes or just feed through the streets?
I think it's a combination. I think it will have to go through pipes to get from at least Camino Real over. There is a passageway. Well, no, it's all going to be in pipe. Now they eliminated that. There was going to be a park entrance and everything, and they eliminated that, and it just became a lot. So most of it will be piped and brought up in there.
This is the same area where Howard Ford Masters property got flooded coming off Rusted Hills. Problems with drainage.
You know, I'm not sure. Foremaster, I think, if I know right, is to the west of this project directly, and it follows, I think, almost the whole border of this.
Yeah, I think it went down and ruined his hay and other things down there. So anytime we talk about taking away detention ponds, and after our meeting last night, we're 100% certain that this thing's even draining correctly, going to make it to the region.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not worried. There will be, this little 25 foot by whatever doesn't have. I'm not sure why that particular flooding happened. I'm not aware of that. But this particular piece is not necessary. It's all going to be taken down into that regional detention pond.
Just open somebody's ear in 2 years from now, there's a flood down there. We're not saying what happened.
Well, it won't be because of this detention pond. If anything, it may be if they're not taking care of their. Again, this gets into what we talked a little bit last night about particular property owners not keeping their water where it's supposed to go on their property. That might have been more of an issue, because if I do know the area, and there is off the back of those lots, and so I don't know if they graded it down because Foremaster is lower than this. And again, they were trying to match road levels, etc., for Camino Real as it came and went southern. So if anything, I don't think that's so much a detention or a stormwater drainage issue as much as it is probably water coming off of those properties off the backs.
Our understanding is these are going to be graded, so all that water is eventually going to come and make it down into the detention pond and not through those properties.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the design is at this point. I don't know if Mike even has an idea of that. Do you know, Mike? I don't get those plans, unfortunately.
It's a great idea if water makes it there.
Yeah, the water is all piped. The whole development and this part of this phase of Rusted Hills and all the other phases and the other developments that will be feeding in through it, they are all piped. They'll pipe into the regional facility, into that, and then that's also will be piped out, and that's actually a project that the city is doing that we're working on that will pipe it down to our main trunk line that we installed a few years
And I
back.
got pipes in just to help me kind of visualize that. So let's say you got this development of 11 units. Somehow the water's going to go to the street and then collect in the street into pipes up there.
Yeah, it'll go out into the gutter, flow down to the gutter to the catch basin, into the pipes and out to the road. Now, what happened with Mr. Formaster and the flooding back there is that these lots were not completely graded off, and we had a pretty good event that hit us last, I think it was in the fall, it hit us out there. And it came off of just these lots that are shown here. And there was supposed to be a berm put up across there, and the developer hadn't put the berm in, so the water just went right on through and into the Formasters. So I think all of that has been addressed and with the finishing of the development.
I guess I know I'm just probably all extra sensitive to what we've seen during this last few rains to make certain these projects are actually developed the way they need to be.
Yeah, this is really what we really look forward to as developments like this happened out here, where all the different developers have come together and put in a major detention basin. Instead of having little small detention basins scattered around, these regional ones just are so much more effective for us. So we're actually been really excited about everybody working together and coming up with this regional basin.
I've been critical of the small ones, and that's that big one. That region, it's a big pond, and it's got a lot of capacity to it.
Yes.
What's the history of it? Was it the developers that all came together and proposed that, or how did it come
Well,
about?
yeah, it was kind of a joint thing with the city. We had all the development started coming along out there in the fields up in this general area, and we had master planned a basin out that area, a regional basin in that area. So we actually are contributing funds towards that basin to build that basin to give us capacity for some existing areas. And it just worked out with the developers and the Staley family coming together with this idea and actually coming to fruition of it.
I'm trying to figure out if it's going to be landscape, so it looks nice, or just going to be a big hole.
Yeah, the ultimate goal is to landscape it. It's going to be owned by the Staley families, and I think they were planning on incorporating it in part of their use at the farm there for activities. I don't know that they're planning on. Well, they're not going to be able to store water in it because it's not designed as a dam. But you know, I'm not sure whether, as Catherine's here, she might be able to address
So to be
that.
clear, it'll fill, and then there will be a line from it to where?
It will go to our main trunk line that's down on 240 West. We put in the twin 84-inch pipes, so that's
it
our
can
main
fill,
backbone.
It can fill. I mean, if you get a lot of water, you can fill it, but you're going to have a lot of outflows.
A lot of outfall, and to tie that in, the city's project is we need to bring the line up 3090 south and then down the Fields Road and tie it in, but that's all part of our master plan, as well as we'll be bringing it up towards Majestic View and Ketchum, some of those areas that we've lost the drainage facilities in there when they pipe the canal. So this is just part of our overall backbone that we've been building out in the fields for drainage.
Sounds like a good idea. Water there.
It's nice to hear more storage versus less.
And that's part of the master plan. If you remember, part of the master plan, we do have identified these regional facilities. And the regional facilities are normally to be owned by the city. Most of the facilities that we own, if it's not designed as a park and accepted as a park, it'll just be a rock line fence, not a kind of an eyesore. But that's what it's built for, is detaining the water and releasing it.
So just in finishing up, to let you know, the Planning Commission did review this. They didn't get quite that far. Again, back on their August 20th meeting, they recommended unanimously that the easement vacation on Lot 6 for the final plat of Rusted Hills Phase 1 be approved by the City Council, and just with the findings that were there, just that we don't need it anymore, and we have a regional detention area to to be able to eliminate this and not worry about it.
Any additional questions for Drew? This is a public hearing. You out there that are involved or would like to share any additional insight, we're welcome.
I'm Catherine Staley, and you knew I'd have to have a word. My concern, I was hoping that Mr. Dennett would be here. My concern is it's a situation where we've been told that something will happen, and then we're seeing that it's not happening, and it's not necessarily the city's fault. It's the developer's situation. If he doesn't have the money to do what he said he would have done by the time the corn maze opened, we're kind of in a quandary about what we should do about it, because we can't come back to you guys and say, this is what he told us would be done, and it's not done. So I don't know what we do about that. We can whine and moan, but I don't know that it'll change anything. As I read this, it says, but since that time a large regional detention pond has been created. Has it been created? Is it ready to go? If it flooded this weekend, it will work. And I also want to make note that where this pond is being put is not a natural flood drain. Am I correct? We've never had flooding there. So it's not like, well, hey, the floods were coming there anyway. It's kind of a personal thing. It's one of those times when Ralph said, well, there's no place else for him to put it, and so that's where they're going to put it. And you can see that I have all the power in the family because there's a hole down there. So we didn't necessarily, we being Sherry and I, didn't necessarily want it there. Our other children didn't either. But my concern, I've had a major concern since the last planning meeting, and we talked about maintenance, and I said, well, who's going to maintain it? And I was told that we were. And I'm concerned, what is the maintenance? What is it that we're supposed to maintain? And maybe you can better tell me so that I don't worry about it. Because I'm not really sure. We've talked about the fact that we have to have it. We want to make it something that's not just an ugly hole in the ground. Something that can be, we've seen a lot of them up north since Ralph made the decision. We've looked up there, and they have grass, and they have trees, and they have, sometimes they have soccer games and things in there to help so that it's a good situation for us, because we didn't need it. But it's there, and so I need to know where we can go on what the maintenance is if the maintenance is okay, we're going to keep the lawn mowed around it, or we're going to do something like that. I can see that, but as far as maintaining the fact that that water's still going to run in there correctly, I can't see where that's something that we should be held accountable for. But after that was said in the meeting, in the planning meeting, I have had some worries about it. I'm worried about it right now because nothing that was supposed to be done by this time as far as Dennett has been done. But you can't have somebody do something if they can't afford it. So there you go. The grass isn't planted, the trees aren't planted, the parking lot was supposed to be done.
Are those the things that you're referring to?
Yes.
The things you just listed?
Well, especially the parking lot. Because when they came in and dug everything up, she had just put so many loads of road base in there for her parking lot, and it's under dirt. And so I don't know what we can do.
So are you I would guess that if you came in here and said we don't want this, you could probably stop the whole thing. But I don't think that's what you're saying.
No, I just want it to be a win-win for all of us.
Okay.
For the regional thing, for Dennett's, for everyone else's runoff water, but I don't feel like we should be the only ones that have to suffer any consequences for being.
I guess as I look at it, I'm somewhat pleased that this is on your and Ralph's property. I know you guys like nice things, like to keep it looking nice. And I have concerns if other parties are supposed to fulfill their obligation and haven't, being asked by that party to vacate an easement. At this point, maybe if we didn't vacate it, really complied with his visions, that we get a chance for him to get it done and come back before us.
Well, I really thought he'd be here tonight, and I'm sure to him this is a minor thing, because that doesn't take up that much space. And we don't want to stop him from selling lots, because if he can sell the lots, he can afford to do what he said he would do. It's just, you're just kind of caught in the middle of it.
What is the design of this? Is it grass or is it rock or is it...
I don't think there's room in the bottom for grass. It's a big pond, but it's not necessarily. It doesn't have a lot of flat.
So it's not like going to be Treasure Valley where they have the...
It probably would hold more than Treasure Valley Park, but it's not as flat. It's long and deep and narrow.
The landscaping of the basin, or the aesthetics, how that was going to be in agreement with the Staleys and the contractor. What the city required is it to be a rock-lined basin to meet our requirements for a basin. And I believe that we're holding a bond for the completion of that basin. Now, I don't know whether that bond is actually included as the grass and trees and whatever else is in there. I'd have to check into that. But I know we have a bond for the completion of that project. I know Mr. Dennett is working on getting funding to finish up the basin. I know that's a concern of ours, that he follows through on his agreement.
It's not lined yet, is it? Is there any rock
It's not
yet?
going to be a line. No, that's the issue. Is the Staleys did not want this ugly rock line. They wanted something that used as part of the farm, and we're fine with that.
Yeah.
And that, like I said, that was an agreement that they had with Mr. Dennett. We're kind of, our hands are tied because it's not really a requirement of the city. So, it's kind of everybody's in a rock and a hard place right now with this. The Staleys are, the city is, trying to get the developer to follow through on this agreement. And the agreement is with the Staleys, not the cities on this step.
So this basin, there's no other project that has this basin tied to as a condition?
Well, yeah, there are several.
Several along there.
Well, Rusted Hills has quite a few things. Don't believe that the Road Run Villages are this now. They actually
Did they opt out?
opt out, I think. I think they're doing their
I
own.
thought they went back and forth and back.
And they did, back and
So the
forth, back and
completion
forth.
and
I'm not
phasing
sure
of
that
this project and maybe others depends on the completion of this basin.
Yes. So, we can, the completion of the basin, even though he's bonded for it. Under our ordinance, he can bond for it and keep moving ahead, but we can probably even hold back until it's.
Now, Catherine, you mentioned the start of the corn maze. At first, I thought that there was a deadline, but it sounds like you would just like some of what he said he would do done, so that
Well,
when
there
the crowd
was
show up.
a time, and I haven't got the papers with me, and finding Sherry at this time is not a possibility.
She's at the court maze.
Somewhere.
Oh.
Somewhere. If your phone's there, I wouldn't know it. But they knew that the parking had to be done before the corn maze opened. Corn maze opened Friday. And if it's a matter of them just not coming in with their equipment and getting road base out, or if they can't afford the road base, we're getting all kinds of. We're not getting
Is the
everything.
road base the biggest dilemma right now? For you?
I would
The most
think
pressing.
so. I would think so.
I
for
can
her.
make a phone call to Mr. Dennett tomorrow and we can press on him how important this is.
And there needs to be something so that how I know none of us would ever do it. You know how kids might think it might be fun to go up and over and into.
Especially with a four-wheel. That would have all kinds of.
So, I mean, you know, you don't want to look at the worst scenario, but you might as well look at it because it'll come to you.
So that was part of it. So just to tie it in, that was part of the deal with it. That Denham was going to do certain. So he must have ripped up the parking lot to put in. Is that what happened?
Yes.
So the road base that Sherry had in for the parking for the corn maze was supposed
It's
to be
about
back
that
in
far
town.
under the dirt.
And so the understanding was that based on the fact that you were going to allow the regional lawn to go there, that he was going to get that back into the state that they can do parking for me.
I certainly think it would be beneficial, Mike, to make that phone call tomorrow.
As far as this little piece, you know, I'm sure that won't have, other than holding the reins on something, that wouldn't have anything if this other's in
I
place.
don't think that Mr. Denham owns this lot.
They already sold it.
So it's the property owner who owns it now. But we can make some phone calls and stuff.
And they,
Push where we can push.
Councilman Turk says, yeah, let's do what we can do, and then always it's left a matter of contract between you. Yeah, that's yeah.
And we worried about that right up front. And I mean, because we had had another incident where he had come in and put a sewer line or put a line at the back of the property and said, if you'll let me put this in, we'll put a chain link fence. Chain link fence didn't go in. The reason the chain link fence didn't go in is somebody hadn't paid him for the work that he'd done. And so, oh well, darn it. So, you know, it's just kind of one of those things you worry about. And, you know, I'm not a,
Catherine, is that road base still usable, isn't it? That he,
if they can get down to it.
yeah,
But they moved all of that dirt, everything. That,
No, that's
it's not.
It's under dirt, it's
Oh, wow.
contaminated, it's.
So you got to bring a new road
It
base
needs
to make
be
the
a new
parking
road
over
base,
there.
Cause the dirt that's over, that's the elevation.
Okay.
Yeah, they need to.
my understanding is they brought something in, but it was like
Bigger?
that, not something you can walk on. They brought one load in and just dumped it, didn't spread it out or anything, just dumped it. I try not to go down there because I find that they put me to work if I do, so I don't want to work down there. I think that's, I mean, I have a lot of concerns about it, but I have had from the very start, and I can't run away and go to Colorado. Forget it this time. They found me last time, and I finally signed, which I'm not sure I should have, but I know it's a good thing for everybody, but I am concerned,
Sure.
again, I am concerned with what the maintenance, what is it you're expecting us to maintain, whether it,
That's pretty simple, we address that. It all depends on what goes in there. If it's a grass area, then we expect it to be maintained, mowed. Or, if it's just lined with rock, we would expect it just to be sprayed. If it's aligned with the rock and meets our standards, the city would be more than happy to take over that basin and do all the maintenance. Make it a city property, I think we deed it over to the city. But it would be a chain link fence line, rock line.
I think one of the questions Staley had is whether they'd have to maintain the piping to get to the facility. And
You know,
obviously,
the
no,
pipe-
that's
The piping to and from the facility would be all on the city, maintain all the piping. It would just be maintaining
landscape.
the landscape around, basically.
okay, so say a situation happened like down in Pineview Estates where one of those flood things just got all backed up and went everywhere. That's, we call the city and
Yeah,
stream.
yeah, if that's backing up, then we would be down to making sure, we'll finding out why it's backing up. It'd be a plugging a pipe or something, but that's gonna be blocking a pipe. replaced.
So ultimately, it's just the basin itself. It's not the water, anything flowing to, from, or to deal with water, city stuff.
So if it's not rock line, then, I mean, another concern would be that it didn't get filled, it didn't get filled up. If it's draft line, it doesn't get filled up, because that's obviously what we needed, the volume there.
Right. Yeah, well, that'd be enough things if it was filled with silt. We wouldn't own it, but I think we'd be very willing to come in.
Maybe that ought to be put as part of the agreement. Silt removal, the city would be a part of silt removal, so that'd probably be a good thing to put in an agreement. So we don't get 10 years down the road and have a situation that says, well, it's your basin, you take care of it. And we're saying, well, they agreed to do it. Well, there's that. I think writing always is a good thing.
Yeah. And we were aware, you know, with Howard Formasters, that was just a matter of he hadn't taken enough time to put the dirt behind so that it went somewhere else. Yeah. And then even after they were told, they didn't do anything. So.
How long ago did that happen with Howard?
It's been a year.
Ago, that
Oh,
year ago.
okay. We're not talking about our pre.
No.
That was the big storm. The big storm a year ago that had where Treasure Valley flooded and all that south.
He had an engineer come and tell Dennett what had to be done now. Howard takes care of things. You push him right to the wall and he'll just take care of it. So. Okay.
So I guess the moral of the story is when a friend deals with a friend, let the bargain be clear and well panned. They may continue to be friends till the end, right?
Right. That's true, because this was my biggest complaint when I found out who was in charge. I said, still haven't got a chain link fence. And then when this is happening, I thought, oh, golly, you don't learn real quick. So, but.
We'll make sure Mike calls tomorrow, Catherine.
Okay.
Maybe you guys could touch base or something, Mike. Or...
Catherine, do you want us to postpone this? Do you want us to?
As far as I'm concerned, I can't see any reason to postpone that.
Okay, neither can I.
But I mean, you guys know best.
I see a better.
Ron, you seem to feel that that would be a good idea, but.
No, I think it's not even he that owns the lot. So.
Yeah, so it wouldn't affect him. And there's really, you know, that's not going to affect anything.
Although this sounds like it's a statement of good faith agreeing to put that in, but allow that one to go ahead and re-release at some point.
But if the water's going to go in there, if something happens, then it shouldn't be a problem. I was just a little worried that the water wasn't ready to go in, but you said it was, so we'll go with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks. Okay, anybody else? If not, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion and a second to close the public hearing.
Nice night.
Truman,
Staley, aye. Segmiller, aye.
Turk, aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. Item B, consideration to approve an ordinance granting the vacation of an easement for Lot 6 of Rusted Hills Phase 1.
Mayor, I'll make the motion that we approve the ordinance granting the vacation of an easement for Lot 6 of Rusted Hills Phase 1.
I have a motion to have a second.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second.
Nice night.
Staley, aye.
Segmiller, aye.
Turk, aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. That will be approved.
Mike, was there any bonding holding that lot at all for the improvement of that? Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine, for your. Item C, continuation of a public hearing for consideration to approve an ordinance adopting the Washington City Transportation Capital Facilities Master Plan Transportation Impact Fee. Mike Shaw.
Mayor, Council, after the last meeting we had on this, we had received the date of that meeting, a letter from Southern Utah Home Builders. We went through their letter. It was actually a very good letter, and they made some very good points that we addressed on this. And one of them was related to, pull out the table here, the table number 4. And that was the actual project list. And they had a question about the bonding on the Washington Parkway and Buena Vista bond. You know, those roads were built a few years back. They were built for the new growth, and they were in the previous impact fees study. But the point they brought up is we actually found in there that the dollar amount that we had in there was actually the original dollar amount for the bonding, so we decreased that bonding amount for what it was at that time that we redid this, so our last bond payments and reduced those amounts down there. Consequently, it lowered our fees, our impact fees, and that was sent out to you in your packet. And what that had done is, on the option 1, which is the 0 to 20 year, it reduced that fee by $138. Option 2 reduced it by $276, and option 3 it reduced it by $391.
Do you have those total? I want to make sure I'm looking at the most recent. I'm looking in the packet. I show option 1 at $3,433. Is
Correct.
that the most recent?
That's the revised.
Okay.
And the existing rate right now, is it correct, Mike, that it's $26.70?
Yes. They also had a question about the funding of projects and how it was broken out. That the which of the projects had money that was non-impact fee money, and that's actually in the appendix here. It actually breaks those out. We have the individual pages for the individual project. It actually breaks that out, and so we commented back on that. And then the third question is about the actual rate, the increased on that, and that's really the council's decision of which way we go on which option they increase in it.
So to be clear, the citizen whose concern was that the work they had done was not contemplated in this study.
That's the wrong impact fee.
Is that the wrong impact
was
fee?
the stormwater.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Mike, is it fair to say that some of these road projects, especially as you get out 6 to 10 and 11 to 20 year improvements, are they sometimes a bit of a moving target?
Definitely.
So it's hard to really
Historically, when I came to work here, the city had just completed a master plan, and it went out to 20 year. Within 10 years, we finished those 20-year projects. And it all is really based on how quick we're going to grow, how quick these projects are going to have to come to pass. But they are a moving target. Some can move out even into a 30-year. It's just going to depend on our growth.
0 to 10, are we pretty confident that those are projects that need to be done, need to be paid for, and if we go with the lowest option, we're not going to have enough funds to do that?
My opinion is they'll happen prior to 10 years. I would not be just surprised to see every one of those projects happen within the 8-year timeline.
If we went with the lowest option, what would have the funding to do those?
We wouldn't be able to do them. That's an issue we're having right now, is trying to fund projects. We're having to do half projects. A good example is we have the Washington Fields Phase 4, which is Lost Ridge Drive to 3650 South. We received $1 million from the MPO for that project, and where the city's putting in $300,000 into it, plus storm drain and sewer improvements along there, which will, the city participation will probably be up to around $700,000. But it only builds a 2-lane road, and we can only go from 3090 to 3650.
Question I have is, in the recent past, we've outpaced some of our neighbors with building permits being pulled. One of the concerns I have, if our impact fee increases, is that takes that projection of 450 building permits each year being pulled. That reduces the number, and then ultimately with the higher impact fee, we don't collect as much because building permits slow down. can you or Mr. Ellerman talk to that just a little bit and see if I would like to get your opinions on what might happen to the number of permits pulled if we do increase the fee.
Well, as part of the transportation master plan, we actually do a projection.
I believe it was 450 if I read it right. And obviously we focused mostly on the residential unit, but it affects a number of other things.
Trying to find it in the plan here real quick. I know we were fairly conservative on our estimation for growth rate. We take into account our ups and downs and try to average it out and try to be fairly conservative on that growth rate. Yeah. Okay. So our average growth rate is 6.5%.
So that percentage in number of permits pulled, can you help? Is that 450? It looks to me, if I'm reading this right, that we're estimating 450 residential units per year. Is that consistent with maybe what we've pulled so far year to date, or do we have numbers?
We do have numbers. I don't know the numbers, but I think Drew would have those. But what we based this off was from went back to 1977 and based that off of and took all the highs and lows, and I know I could throw this up on.
While you're doing that, I'm just saying, I obviously understand council can stay these concerns. We don't want to have cost of building in the city so high that nobody comes to the city, and I think that's why we talked about maybe leisure services, reduce some of their impact fees, and then offset the increase in the impact fees for transportation.
Do you know how many permits we've pulled year to date? I can interpret either if you give me some parameters. I mean, if we're talking fiscal year, what do we go, August 1 to July 31? So how do you track permits? Do you annual or fiscal? So maybe give me annual to date. That might be easier. It might be easier for me to understand annual permits to date. Or how is this tracked? Fiscal or annual?
Just the governor's stats?
No, this is actual stats from the city.
No, the governor's always off.
Yeah. It also takes in the census, the census numbers. We look at census, we look at the governors, and we look at our actual building permits when we look at this. So the red line here is Washington. That's how they averaged out to 6.5% growth rate. Now, if our growth rate declines, then that also it just reduces the amount of projects we have to build. So if we drop down to a 2%, then the projects will start slipping back on the timeline when they would need it.
That would lessen the need for the new roads. So
with all of the projects that have been approved, obviously there's a lot of things that's pulled on those new projects, and we have hundreds of ones that have approved here recently, or at least subdivisions that have come before us.
Yeah, paper lots I probably have 2,000 plus, but some haven't even put a shovel in the ground on some of those preliminary approvals. Others have. So that's kind of it's kind of one of those weird questions that, yeah, there's available ready to go that have been approved, several thousand. Right now, to go out and see how many lots you could start building a home on within a week if you got plans through and everything, I would probably be in the ballpark of 500 to 750 lots that are ready to go right now, just waiting for someone to come start putting footings on. But just to answer part of the question, I hope last calendar year we had roughly 600 for 2013, January 1 through December 31st. We're starting off, I hate to say, a little bit slower these first 2 months of this fiscal year. I'm not up to the average I wanted. Not sure what. I think it slowed down a little bit.
So that 600 would be about 50 a month. What have we pulled in the last couple of months?
We're probably averaging 30, 35 for the first two, July and August. Of course, this month's not completed yet. But there has been, if you walk up and look at my building department's front desk, and most of you have been there, it's loaded with permits right now that are going to be in through review. They do. They come in, it's amazing. Some days nothing, and other days I get 10 dropped off. And then they start through the process and review and stuff. So we have noticed an increase in permits, coming in on a more current than they had been the first 2 months. So
if we base a lot of this decision on the single-family residential unit, but I noticed that there's an index with the percentage that applies to all different types of properties, multifamily properties, retail, industrial. How are those indexes affected by, what the residential limit is? Do they all just still say as a percentage of that?
It is. It's based off of the single-family unit. And then, so the single-family unit, whatever fee we adopt, but if you look at, excuse me, Table 1, is I believe what you're looking at. It shows the 3159 is the single-family unit, and as you go down there, it shows the different dollar amounts for the commercial buildings, and then those are based off of square footage, or school is number of students, or a hotel is the number of rooms, and then that's actually a multiplication that we have to do on
so
that
they call that
the
demand index, single-family equivalent. Are those numbers still the same? Are those proportionately the same to what we currently have, or did those indexes rise?
No, those indexes are exactly what they were in the previous one. And those are all based off of the ITE trip generation method. So that's really kind of the Bible that everybody uses. It looks at thousands and thousands and thousands of businesses to develop the trips that are generated out of them. So it's a very accurate trip generation. If you pull up one, say if we want to pull up a service station, right in that manual it'll actually say that they've calculated this based off of 3,000 service stations that they actually physically counted the trips generated out of them based off of the number of trips. One thing we also looked at is, especially on the trips generated in several plans back, we didn't break down the commercial because they call pass-through trips. If you're going to Walmart to go grocery shopping, and then you decide to run to the bank, well, that's not two separate trips. They consider there's pass-through there, so there's a deduction for those pass-through trips, because you're going to make multiple stops through there. So it actually reduced our actual fee that we're charging commercial.
Any other questions for Mike or Drew? Like you're very deep in thought. Again, this is a public hearing. Any of you or all of you that might be interested in this little thing we're looking at, come on up and
Hi again. I'm Mari Smith, Executive Officer with the Southern Utah Home Builders Association, and I would just like to first address the mayor and the council and the city staff, and I want to tell each one of you thank you very much for working with the members of the Southern Utah Home Builders Association. We were actually given time to review the transportation plan. We were able to submit comments and questions, and our questions were thoroughly addressed, so we really appreciate working together on that, and we do feel that it's going to be a better study in the end because we were involved. So appreciate that. Let's see. I have 2 items that I want to mention. Is the first item, and there might have been a little confusion on the funding of the project. Our statement was referring to, in regards to the Impact Fee Act, it states that you can only charge for the actual costs of the projects. So when the actual costs are unknown, the impact fee analysis should be updated to reflect the actual costs. And so our request would be is possibly if the council would consider in the impact fee ordinance to include a provision that allows the project cost to be automatically updated when the project is completed, instead of waiting until the next impact fee analysis is done, which would probably be about 5 years from now. So that's just one of the requests. And then the second item, and I appreciate all the questions that you had. It helped me understand it more, the study. I just want to say, first of all, you know, that builders and developers, they are more than willing to pay their fair share of the impact fees, you know, as long as they're justified. And we understand that new growth, it requires different infrastructure and things as a result of new growth. We do have 2 reports here that show a comparison of impact fees, total impact fees between the 2 cities, between all the cities in Washington County. One report we show that Washington City is the highest in the county, and then I have another report that actually shows that Washington City is the second highest in the county. And so, you know, with this transportation impact fee, I believe the city staff is probably recommending the second item, which is to increase 18%. So it would go from $2,670 to $3,159. If the council feels this is necessary to support the future growth and the projects, and we're in support of that. If by chance, you know, that you can look at option number 3 to actually reduce it to $2,069 for the impact fee, and possibly reevaluate the impact fee analysis in 3 to 5 years based on the growth, and then it could be adjusted at that point. So I'd just like to say, you know, of course we're in support of reducing impact fees. If that's not an option, we would love for it to stay the same. I think that would be a great middle ground that we, you know, would be able to work with. So does anyone have any questions?
I just want to say we appreciate Sula's work. You know, you spend your own money in reviewing these, and you're here to review those.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly appreciate the fact that we don't want to price people out of building in Washington. I know the fear I have personally is that I think our roads are probably behind the 8 ball, and if we took the lowest option now and then 3 to 4 years looked at it, instead of an 18% increase, it might be 40% increase, and then everybody really be screaming.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to do the prudent thing and make certain that builders pay their share, so our roads are maintained and the city stays functional.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and somehow we have to be sensitive and see if we can take reductions in other areas to offset what transportation might do. It's the city's obligation is to provide roads and infrastructure. If we take money from other areas to help offset the impact fees, we should do that.
Mm-hmm. And absolutely, and it was mentioned to me there might be some other areas that you can actually reduce the impact fees for Washington City to help offset this increase. And so, you know, we are in support. If this is needed, you know, new roads, then we're in support of that. I've been a resident of Washington City for almost 20 years now, and so I just want to tell each one of you, thank you for your service. I think you're doing a wonderful job. You know, of course, there's always room to improve, but again, and we don't want to be unreasonable, so we're here to be fair.
All right, can you show on the screen here the chart, the comparison chart that you showed us?
Yeah, I have 2. One was done by the City of St. George, and it was based on when they were doing all their impact fees. And then this one is showing out of Washington County. Santa Clara is listed first, and then there's South Jordan, and then Washington is showing 13,803. I was actually provided by another chart when I visited Santa Clara, and this was based, they put this chart together when they actually called the cities, and they were provided this information. So, and I'm not saying one is right or wrong. It is showing, you know, Washington City is the highest here. So for sure, I'm confident that Washington City is either the first or second highest in the county. And you can see Ivins and Hurricane and St. George is considerably less.
These aren't the first charts that I've seen, and I've seen a lot of variation.
There's a lot of
depending on who it is
variables.
and depending on which ones they
Absolutely.
looked at. I think that you've got to be real cautious to make sure you're looking at all the same things for everyone.
Absolutely.
And then I know, like, Washington's had a few changes. I know St. George in the last year's made some fairly substantial changes, and so
Yeah.
wish there was some real-time place that would really be able to show you.
You
Well,
know,
the one thing
and
that-
I agree too, completely. That's why I'm not saying these are the exact numbers. I think this is giving us a ballpark. There's so many variables, you know, as far as meter size and, you know, exactly when these numbers were collected. So, but I'm just kind of trying to share the information that I have just to show you that Washington City is on the high end.
Yeah, one of the things that these types of graphs really don't bother me, I guess, because one of the things that we've done a great job, I think, in this community is making sure our plans are continually updated. About every 5 years, we're redoing those plans, we're relooking at them to maintain those. And I think it reflects on the quality of the product we're putting on the ground out there.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, we may have been the highest, but I know a year ago we had the most building permits in the county in this city.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see that, I mean, it reflects to the quality of the products that we're putting on the ground out there. And so
Mm-hmm.
to me, if it's warranted to continue to provide the type of product and the quality of life that our citizens expect,
Mm-hmm.
that's the cost of doing business.
Mm-hmm. And like you said before, you know, it's probably not the goal of the city to be the largest city in the county, and I completely understand that. And with transportation, if this fee is justified, then absolutely, you know, that's your decision to support that. I think it is important to collect, you know, kind of, you know, comparable data between the cities. And again, I want to state it again, these are not exact numbers, they're not apples to apples, but I do feel that there's an approximate range. Even if you don't want to refer to this one, you know, you can refer to this one. This was done by an outside consultant for the St. George City Department, and so you're seeing, even if the impact fee is considerably less here, yeah, exactly, and so you're still, you know, the second highest. So, and St. George, you can see they were at $11,008 and they went down to $10,660. So maybe, you know, in the future you could just look at other areas where you may not need to collect as much impact fees.
I appreciate you bringing those in.
Okay.
I think I actually requested some sort of comparison of the cities so we knew where we were at when we were talking about this issue last time. So it's helpful to put it into context. I think we need to be careful and make certain we don't price ourselves out of bringing in new builders into the community. And we still have to, I think we focus on our highest priorities first. And if we can put some money and save some money from other areas, we need to do that to lower the overall cost.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, thank you. Any other
Thank you,
questions?
Laurie.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mari. Appreciate it.
Just real quickly, I really do appreciate working with the Home Builders Association. It's nice to have a fresh set of eyes to look at the study, for them to look at it and catch that and actually reduced our fee. You know, we do appreciate that. And Mari's been really good to work with. Our last impact fee transportation was in 2010, so we've, you know, made it about 4.5 years before we're in the update right now. We've actually been working on this for probably close to 8 months. So we do keep on our studies. We get them every 5 years pretty quickly.
What about Mari's suggestion that in the ordinance, if the actual costs, you know, budget for these, let's say the actual cost turned out to be less, would we do a downward adjustment of the fees? Or if they were actually more, would we automatically increase the fees going forward? Is that something
We
else to
could
consider?
go that direction, maybe do it annually, not as every project's completed, because you might be
Annualize
doing
it
5 or
separate.
6 a year, but
Yeah.
we could maybe look at it annually and,
The risk goes both ways. It might go
Correct.
up. And
yeah.
Well, my concern is just really making sure that fits in consistent with the intent of the impact fee, whole public, we have public hearings for those, and any the automatic adjustment of these ones in which we got to go through that whole noticing process. I'm just not so sure how you automatically work those in. So one way or the other, if you're a developer, I don't think you want to come in. You shouldn't have to come in and go, well, wait a second, you just raised those $200 because you said your actual was that. But had I known they were going to be $200 more, I would have been in. I just don't know. I think we face the possibility of someone coming in and objecting to that, saying, well, you need to go through the process to do that.
Yeah.
If it goes the other way, typically, it's just probably good likelihood nobody's going to come in and say, well, I'm objecting, I'm not going to pay lower fees because of that.
I can see it being an administrative headache costing more for engineers.
I just don't know how. And Mari, have you seen anybody do that? Because there's certain things that are actual costs, like administration type fees that we do that we can set on our fee schedule, and we can do that so much easier because it's just a matter of them approving the fee schedule yearly. And that, impact, inspection fees, the kind of stuff that, really easy to track. I think it's much easier to do that way. Have you seen anybody do it where they automatically adjust it like that? 'Cause I got some concerns with the procedure. I'd love to see where they've done it, because I don't think we'd have an objection to that if we could do that. I just have a concern that even if the consultants would go ahead and do it, that if we were raising them, I just think we'd have a lot of people crying foul.
Yeah, I would think if we're adjusting an impact fee, we would still have to follow all the statutes and have a public hearing and have the engineer to do the review on it, have them do the estimates.
Yeah, that's my concern, Mari, is that. And again, I'm not sure I'd care if we lowered it, but the second we try to increase it to make up that automatic, immediate kind of adjustment, so that at the end of the day, we're staying right on point. I find it may be problematic. I don't think the council would care if we did.
I'd rather not talk about impact fees every year.
Yeah.
I'd rather do our best when we do it, and then I mean, these projects take a long time. Some years are up on permits, some are down. You gotta let some of that work itself
Well, it's
out.
kind of like Mike said, you've been 8 months on this one, so it's almost a year process.
Yeah, so I don't think we disagree, Mari. That's a great suggestion. I just think practically speaking, we're the ones at the end of the day that have to follow that process, right to the line. It just may become problematic.
Who has the crystal ball?
Hey Mike, I know this isn't anywhere in the recommendations, but if I said, what if we just left it static at 2670? That would clearly cover all 0 to 5 year projects, and then somewhere between 50 and 100% of 6 to 10 year projects. Is that how it would work out on your end? Let's say that happened, and you then had to manage what you received. It seems like you would probably just select which of those 6 to 10 year projects had priority with the money that you actually received.
Exactly. Yeah, we would just set them in priority. Our long-range planning would be narrowed down to what we're estimating, what our revenue would be on that.
Any other questions for Mike or Mari or anybody else that's out there? Anybody else want to offer some input? If not, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing, unless you have any additional questions. Council members.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second.
Nice and I.
Truman, aye.
Staley, guy.
Second,
Turek, guy.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll move on to D, continuation of the consideration to approve ordinances adopting the Washington City Transportation Master Plan and Transportation Impact Fee.
There's a couple of adjustments we need to make, just the references. I think we have maybe in, the engineer may have provided outdated just Utah code reference, so it should just be chapter 36A opposed to 201. That's an easy adjustment. If you don't mind if I made that. If adopted.
I noticed on one of the ordinance sites, instead of a lowercase c, it was a copy sign.
Yes, so there's a couple of, I just want to make sure those are consistent with the current revised ordinances. Otherwise, the references are all the same. It's just, I mean, other than citing being wrong and such things as that, I didn't see any errors otherwise.
Before anybody makes a motion, if I can just kind of state my feelings about that, that is, I think that we've kind of lagged behind in transportation. We've done a good job with what money we've had. When we start taking money from the general funds to the roads go, well, it's fair share. We don't want them to pay more than their fair share. They ought to pay their fair share. If we don't adopt plan number 2, option number 2, I think in 5 years from now, we'll be looking at an increase substantially greater than 18%. So I feel pretty strong that we ought to go forward with the option 2, make certain we pay as we go and not continue to try to slide by and push it off to some other.
You know, one thing I've always been impressed with on Councilman Truman is you've been an advocate for roads, whether it's the early maintenance of roads, the maintain the condition, build the roads, maintain the roads. I've been very impressed with that. Part of the issue that I'm having tonight is, you know, we had recently discussed the public safety impact fee. We made some adjustments there for the new police station. We've talked about looking at Parks and Rec impact fee to maybe be a little more conservative there. We've had lots of discussion on our stormwater impact fee. I know we've tasked our city manager with bringing us reports that we were grateful that the Southern Utah Home Builders Association brought tonight. I personally would like to have our manager do that work and bring those reports to us that show line by line what our holistic impact fees are and how they relate to our neighbors. Not to say that we don't need to collect the right amount of impact fee for the services that we offer, but it's also that we need to a certain extent, be competitive. So while I agree with you there, I'm almost wondering that if maybe this is a good study, it's a solid study, it makes sense, but I almost wonder if I would be more comfortable taking a little more time to digest this study and make a motion on the study until I see the full context and maybe some work sessions to understand what impact fees add up to the total impact fee that the builder pays, and make sure that we're being as competitive as we can across the board without piecing it together. And then I would just fear that we at the end look and say, oh, we've added a little here, and all of a sudden we priced ourselves more than we need to. I don't know if that made sense, but that's kind of how I'm feeling right now.
One of the things, just to kind of echo that, though, I look at the needs in each community is always different, and so hence your impacts are going to be different. You know, St. George City goes out and bonds or voter taxes all their recreation, the trails and stuff. The voters.
Yeah, I was wondering about
increase
that.
The property tax on it. So when you start looking at impact fees, then you go into property tax. You go. I mean, basically, you can fill the balloon full if you want. So I guess that's why I feel so confident in the fact that our community stays on top of our studies. 5 years, we're turning those things, we're looking at them again. So we're staying on top of those, and we're looking and telling us what the data tells us. I mean, what the study tells us, we're where we need to be. I think we've been very conservative on those studies and said, okay, let's get by the best we can. So I feel confident in the numbers that we're seeing.
Well, there's no doubt that we've got a little more sprawl, maybe than some of our neighbors, with the developments and on the south side.
Well, a lot of their traffic, a lot of their infrastructure for traffic is built in, and so there's just more maintenance issues than it is building. For ours, we're starting to sprawl. We're actually adding new, and so it's tough. Especially major corridors become. I mean, we start looking at interchanges. You're talking huge expenses off of freeway interchanges and those things that they're not playing in. So.
I still think I'd like to see it in a little bit of a more comprehensive point before I move forward with any changes to more impact fees, especially they've seemed to come at us a little fast, and I know it's been a little more staff driven on some of these than council driven. So I think I'd like to spend a little more, personally would like to spend a little more time in workshop session to look at those more comprehensively. Not that I don't doubt your study, not that I don't agree with Councilman Truman and priority on roads and collecting the right impact fee. I just think I'd like to see it in the full context.
Your comparison on impact fees is actually in your packets. It's under information. I don't know why I got put under information, but I prepared that because council had asked for it.
So where is it?
Yeah, I didn't see it either.
Go to your council packet and under information.
It's not in the thing for tonight's meeting.
No. It was, yeah.
Street impact.
Council
comparison.
requested that, I believe, it was on the stormwater.
So it's the street impact comparison. We got Hurricane 2002-94, Ivans 2008-83, Laverton 678, Santa Clara 1562, St. George City 7. Street impact. We don't have a global comparison of.
Yeah, I didn't pull it up. We actually prepared one for all the impact fees for all the local cities. We actually, I think, included Cedar City in that comparison.
Oh, I really appreciate this, Mike. This is helpful.
Now, just to...
Sorry, Councilman Turk mentioned bonding. How does St. George build the roads and deal with, they struggle. Like, I look at our 5 and 10 year, 15 year projects, and there's a lot of big stuff in the fields that needs to be done because we're taking raw farmland and turning it into communities. How do they?
St. George funds a lot of their road projects with their general fund because they have such a large sales tax base that they do a lot of general fund to their roads to fund
business
space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You don't have that makes sense.
Well, then there are two major corridors, or UDOT corridors, that are maintained by UDOT, and so they don't have the expense of those
three
major corridors.
Sunset, Bluff, and the Boulevard are UDOT roads.
Then when they do gravel.
Chip seal. Now, I think most of you know, I worked for Santa Clara prior to coming here, and I've been here a long time. But Santa Clara and Ivans both they're a smaller community. They're limited on their growth, so their size of roads and the amount of roads they have to build out there are very small compared to ours. So, Hurricane has a little bit of advantage because they got SR9 that runs right through the middle of their town, which they can just funnel their traffic to SR9.
Why did the telegraph improvement then turn that over to Washington City? That was before my time, and I know we are now responsible for the maintenance of that road. Why are we maintaining that road after it was improved while our neighbors are having the state maintain their major corridors?
The only piece of telegraph that we took over, the rest was from 500 West to Green Springs. The rest of Telegraph was already a city road. It was deeded to the city, I believe, back in the 70s. So the Telegraph all the way out to SR9 from 500 West has been the city road. So we just took over that section between 500 West and Green Springs, and mainly we took that over to be able to control access. We've had such an access problem, and our access management is I should put this. We're a little bit more enforcement on our access management than UDOT has been on that section of road. There's accesses that when that approvals came through on that, and it was on UDOT's approval because it was their road, we did not want those accesses to be there because we knew it was going to be an issue in the future. And it's a mid-block one there between the signal at Walmart and Green Springs. We wanted to make those a ride-in, ride-out only back, 10 years ago, and they allowed them to be a full access. So that's really the main reason why the city took it over. Now, we actually get extra money for maintenance on that road from UDOT because we did take it over.
Class B, where?
The Class C money.
Class C.
Mm-hmm. We actually get more than what we'd get just for the lane miles on it, just because the size of that road, and that was part of the agreement, and as well as maintaining signals.
If I remember right, they contributed a little more to that project because we were willing to take it over. There was some give and take, if I recall, right?
Right. And that's what really moved up the funding to rebuild Telegraph through there is the city's willingness to take that road over.
Thanks, Mike. Anybody ready to make a motion?
I'll make a stab at it. I'll make a motion that we approve the ordinances with the changes talked about by council for the city as far as the citations, adopting the Washington City Transportation Master Plan and Transportation Impact Fee, option number 2 being the fee that will be adopted.
That'd be 3159, correct? I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second.
Nice and I.
Aye.
Staley, nay.
Turek, aye.
Right, that passes 4-1.
And council, just for clarification, you're also okay, but I'm just gonna clarify the correct references there.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that in the motion.
Also, a part of that ordinance, and I actually prepared the ordinance, not the engineer.
I appreciate the vote. I think I would still like to have that workshop session, Mayor, if you wouldn't
Absolutely.
mind.
Absolutely.
And Mike, we appreciate what you do with the funds that you have for the roads. I mean,
Thank you.
you've done some pretty amazing things, and I know we'll continue to.
Table
to do
1
that.
is part of the ordinance that needs to be input into the ordinance. Is table 1 that was in there that listed the fees.
We still have one impact fee coming down the pipe. And
Stormwater.
maybe we can make sure we have that before we have the next discussion, because I agree with you wholeheartedly, Councilor.
I will.
Yeah, I
I will
agree
get
too.
that tomorrow. We prepared that at the same time we did that. I wasn't aware we didn't give that to them to put in, but I will have them put that in tomorrow into your packet.
Mike, are you saying that they needed to adopt something into something? they
Well,
should
this
have-
table was part of the ordinance,
Tara,
and the ordinance that was
Would
there
you
was
put
just
that
from the
on the next work
2010 ordinance.
session?
I just went and made some changes in it. Denise said pull the table out because it wasn't accurate, and just to mention that this table had to go in place of it.
Well, let's make sure that's clear then. Plus,
Yeah.
we have 2 ordinances. Was the motion to approve both
Well,
of the
they're on the
ordinances
conference.
adopting the transportation, both the transportation facility analysis of plan and to adopt whichever, I forget which option.
This,
It's option
Yeah,
2, and
option.
we need the schedule that goes with the particular document that would be part of the motion. Obviously, the ordinance has to contain the schedule.
Yeah, so Mark, are you concerned we don't have that in there? We want to make sure we clarify that.
well, we didn't insert it because we didn't know which option the council would go with. So this table 1 is for
Okay.
option 2.
Okay.
That is existing that you have in your packet.
So was that part, so your understanding as you guys voted on it was that would become part of that?
And it should, it's got to be part of if option 2,
Exactly.
that table supports it. That'll be part of it.
Right, I just want to make sure what Mike was saying, just to make sure that they understood it and that it was expression, okay. And did we approve both ordinances then? Because we do have both the ordinances. One was adopting the plan, one was adopting the actual
impact.
impact fee ordinance.
Third, yeah.
Okay, you did them together, okay, just want to make sure we got that clear.
Master plan and transportation.
Got it.
impact fees.
Got it.
They kind of go hand
So
in
Mike,
hand.
are you satisfied? I don't want to say if you're happy or not, because I realize we're not increasing our general fund any with anything we did there, so.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you again, Mike, for all the work you're doing to keep us up and running. So, Tara, would you make a note of all that Councilman Staley and Sigma requested and pass that on to the manager?
We had to make sure for council, what council wanted.
We're going to do a workshop in the conference
Right,
room.
or the transportation for all of them, council?
No, all
The whole-
All of them,
Yeah.
to kind of go along with whatever comparison you got also? With the, oh,
Right.
yeah, no, it won't be a special meeting, but,
Yeah.
okay. And Mike, they already have kind of a table comparison you think that they wanted to be able to review and analyze?
Thank you. Item 9, resolution. Consideration to approve a resolution of Washington City, Utah, adjusting the boundary between Washington City and the city of St. George in the area of Red Ledge Drive.
Wasn't that going to require a public hearing? That one?
I can't remember. Was that?
This wasn't the
Oh, that's
boundary
right, we got
adjustment for
it.
the property up by Red Ledge. Oh, this is,
This is the resolution, setting the resolution to
okay.
public hearing.
Got it.
The ordinance sounds like it's not just, I mean, it's basically saying we resolve to change it, which I'm willing to do based on discussion last night. But
we may be getting the cart before the horse a little bit on this one. Again, nobody is in a rush to get this. I think you guys took it in the second you saw it to discuss at the work meeting. I'd say that either we continue this or we just have it reset at a time in which all the stars align, so there's no confusion with anybody. Right. Well, plus we want to make sure that St. George has got theirs start with their side of it. There's no point in us even starting to set the resolution to set the hearing. St. George doesn't say, okay, yeah, we're good with that. We're going to start running on ours also.
Yeah, we can't force them to accept this.
No, but typically when we do an adjustment, it's because we both cities have said, yeah, we're both good with this.
Okay.
So let's just confirm now they're good with it, and then both move on kind of at least trying to coordinate somewhat on it. That would be my suggestion.
So your suggestion is continue it.
I would just say
Bring it
let's
back
just
to a date certain.
reset it for a date to be established by city administration.
There's no public hearing or notice, so we don't need to say a date certain on this.
No, there was not.
Okay, Mayor, I'll make a motion that we discuss this at yesterday's work session. And based on that discussion and also discussion again tonight, my motion would be that we continue the consideration of the resolution adjusting the boundary between Washington City and the City of St. George in the area of Red Ledge Drive. And it will be continued essentially until the date that deemed appropriate by council and staff to bring it back to consideration.
I have a motion and a second.
Nice night.
Staley, aye.
Segmiller, aye.
Turk guy.
Thank you, gentlemen. Item 10, franchise agreement. Consideration to approve revisions to the Dixie Power franchise agreement.
I guess I might as well take it.
Yeah, we did take that, Council.
Yeah, we discussed this yesterday. This was a matter of just trying to clarify some area in which between Dixie REA and city where that franchise boundary was. And I think based on a workshop or discussion, it has made sense that that adjustment be made consistent with the resolution will state, and that is just moving from the middle of the Virgin River over to the area near the river. Yeah, we have wording in there. It doesn't, but based on just on the resolution that identifies that small area there, which would then provide for Dixie REA to provide the power, which Dixie REA also thinks makes more sense. We certainly think makes more sense for everybody and for landowners.
Yeah, this is a great thing. I talked to the manager years ago about this area. This is a long time coming, and I think they'll be able to service this area better. For those watching, it's the area south of the dump, but north of the Virgin River on the east side of the hill there. But depending on how that property is ultimately used, which we think could potentially be some industrial or commercial areas, that might provide some competitive power rates to attract some jobs in the industry. So it's a good thing, and we appreciate them taking that service area.
And I think they appreciate the fact that we're willing to say, yeah, this makes more sense for you guys to have it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's consistent with the overall philosophy. We don't provide power to make money. We do whatever's best for our citizens. Like, this is going to be best to get it.
And the underlying landowners are also in favor of it.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's one power company that's servicing there right now, and it's not Washington.
Correct. Correct.
So it also just makes sense given the circumstances.
Right.
You want to ramrod that, Councilman Staley?
You got it. I'll motion that we approve the revisions to the Dixie Power franchise agreement as outlined.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
Councilman Turk guy.
Segmiller, aye.
Staley, aye.
Truman, aye.
Nice night.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any reports from your assigned committees?
I'll say thank you to CEC. I know there's been a lot of good things happening with our community television and a lot more involvement by the DSU students. They're doing some really neat things there, and we appreciate what they're covering. I know one of their big pushes is to be involved in our community events, and each time we're at a meeting, they remind us that if our city has something, whether city-sponsored or community-sponsored, that we would like to be covered, just to give them notice, and they would be happy to make arrangements for that. So yeah, anyway, things are going really well with that.
Well, why don't you put October 24th on your calendar? You can watch us all golf on the Mayor's Cup, at the Mayor's Cup at Green Spring.
She wants to golf.
I want to be the commentator on that
film
one.
the golfing. She wants to do the golfing. I'd probably be better off commenting than golfing.
You're all invited, gentlemen. You'll be getting an invite on that. That's
You
coming
make
up
the
in
comments
October.
much easier there if you're golfing. That way, most of us would hear actually.
We want a play-by-play of the mayor on each hole, each shot.
That'd be a lot of fun, though, wouldn't it? All right. Anything else, gentlemen? Nothing to report. I know the city manager asked to be excused tonight. He's making a presentation in Logan, and so we'll move on to item 13. I entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So made.
Second.
Nice and I.
Staley, aye.
Segmiller, aye.
Turk eye.
Just want to go on record with CEC how his work with you fine gentlemen on this council. It's a pleasure and an honor to work with you. I appreciate your thoughtfulness and your insights, and you are moving Washington City forward in a very, very fine manner, along with our department heads and their staff. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mayor.